Yuma, hello everybody and welcome. Welcome to the 18th year of the apology. My name is Violet Sheridan. I'm a local elder, a senior Ngunnawal elder, and this is my mother's country. So welcome to the land of the Ngunnawal people. But before I go to my welcome, I'd like to acknowledge a few people. I'd like to acknowledge Prime Minister, the Honourable Anthony Albanese, Her Excellency, Honourable Sam Mostyn, Governor-General of Australia, His Excellency, Mr Beckett, former Prime Minister Kevin Rudd, Michael McLeod, our Indigenous Affairs Minister, Malandiri McCarthy, my fellow Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples, and distinguished guests. Most importantly, I acknowledge the surviving members and descendants of the stolen generation who have gathered here today on Ngunnawal country. This day belongs to you. Your strength, your survival, your truth sit at the heart of this moment. 18 years ago, this nation stopped, if only briefly, and spoke words that should have been said long before. The national apology acknowledged a deep and lasting wrong. It recognises the pain caused when Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander children were taken from their families, their language, their culture and their country. That pain did not end with the apology. It lives on in families, in communities and across generations. The stolen generation, not just children removed, they were mothers left grieving, fathers left powerless, grandparents left with empty arms, culture disrupted, identity fractured, trauma passed down where love and belongings should have flowed freely. When the nation confronts its history with truth and empathy, it lifts a heavy burden from its shoulders. It allows healing to begin. But truth-telling must be more than words spoken. Once, it must guide how we act today. And that is where I must speak plainly. Despite knowing the damage caused by past child removal policies, First Nations children are still being taken from their families at shocking and alarming rates. We cannot say never again while continuing the same patterns under different names. As a mother, as a grandmother, as a great-grandmother, and a carer, I know the power of children being raised in loving, strong, culture-grounded homes. I know that families are not perfect, but love, connection, and culture matter. Where families face challenges, our responsibility should be to support them, strengthen and walk alongside them, not to search for reasons to remove children. First Nations children belong with families. They belong in their culture. They belong on their country. If this nation is serious about honouring the apology, then it must ensure we do not repeat the harm of the past. The true measures of today is not moving our The true measure of today is not how moving our ceremonies are, but whether our actions protect our next generations. Let us all honour the survivors. Let us all honour the children who never came home. And let us all be brave enough to ensure no more children are lost to a system that should exist to care, not to harm. I'd like to pay my respects to my elders past, present and emerging, and extend that respect from the bottom of my heart to all First Nations people here this morning. But I'd also like to extend that respect to all non-Indigenous people in the room as well. And in keeping in the general spirit of friendship and reconciliation, it gives me great pleasure once again to welcome you to my mother's country, the land of the Ngunnawal people. And on behalf of my families and the other Ngunnawal families, I say once again welcome. But I'll also send my love to the survivors here today and wish you and your families a safe journey home. God bless you all. Thank you.
Here we are gathered together this morning on the ancient and unceded lands of the Ngunnawal people. In the language of music and in the language of my ancestors, the people of the Yorta Yorta Nation, we pay our respects to those who have been long time living here.
Good morning, everyone. Auntie Violet Sheridan, I remember your mother's broken heart, and thank you for connecting us and challenging us here this morning and welcoming all of us to be together on your country, Ngunnawal country. David Williams, your powerful didge opened up the hearts. I hope it close some of the space between us. And Deborah Cheetham for Yong and the Canberra Symphony Orchestra String Quartet, to hear that acknowledgement of country with the beauty of that voice and in language in this house is also a challenge to not forget, but to remember the best of what has always been here and what should today bring us together to take up Auntie Violet Sheridan's reminder that we are still seeing children removed. I'd like, for that reason, to do something that we haven't done over these 18 years, which is to invite, if you care to and if you can, the members of the stolen generation, the survivors here today, to just stand up, just for a moment or two. Please stand, if you can, and if you care to. And ladies and gentlemen, would you put your hands together on behalf of our country and acknowledge the courage of the people in this room. Thank you, brothers and sisters. On behalf of the Healing Foundation and Stolen Generation organisations around the country who have made this the largest gathering of these commemorative events, some 550 people are here this morning, and there are many linked events around the country, all focused on the meaning of the apology and the promise not to see this happen again. A warm welcome to our official honoured guests, the Governor-General, Her Excellency, the Honourable Sam Mostyn AC, her husband, His Excellency, Mr. Simeon Beckett, SC, and their daughter, Miss Lottie Beckett, the Prime Minister, the Honourable Anthony Albanese, MP, the Minister for Indigenous Australians, the Honourable Senator Malandiri McCarthy, your many Cabinet colleagues, MPs from federal, state and territory governments, and looking around the room, so many leaders here from every field of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander life. To everyone here offering support for this coming together, this listening and healing that this day is about, at your tables are members of the Stolen Generation from the Kimberley in the west to Cherbourg in Queensland, down to Kinchela Boys Home and Bomaderry further south, really from all around this land, those institutions that kept children captive and set up the trauma that like a wave continues today. They are here to explain to all of us what is still needed to address the trauma of that intentional destruction of families and culture that Auntie Violet Sheridan spoke of. There was also the widespread sexual and physical abuse. The foundational racism in our history is bound up in that policy. And it is why Auntie Sheridan is reminding us that if we continue to see 20,000 children living in state care, we are continuing the cultural obliteration through the disintegration of the strength of families and community. In essence, this part of Australian history was an attempt to breed out the essence of the world's oldest continuous cultures. We cannot forget that, especially on this day. We have a Royal Commission now to wrestle with racism. So surely we also need to keep in mind this morning that Aboriginal children are being removed from their families at a rate some 9 times faster than other Australian children. It's 20 times higher in Western Australia, as some here this morning will explain. What are we doing to have 20,000 Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander children still in 2026 removed from their families? We're certainly not on track to meet that Close the Gap target 12 of reducing what I would say is the stolen generations pattern by 45% by 2031. So Auntie Violet Sheridan and other speakers here this morning are setting down the challenge. If we are going to close that space between us, support the peak bodies, the Aboriginal community organisations, the Healing Foundation, that are together with us, needed to take action, not a ceremony, action. Thank you. All of the speakers here this morning will take up that challenge and try and set down ways that we can act personally and collectively to look at this unfinished business. I would invite you to start on your breakfast if you haven't already. The hot breakfast is going to be served at about 8:20 a.m. In the lineup of speakers today, we need a constant. We need to emphasise that the progress hasn't been fast enough, but to keep saying to ourselves what Aboriginal elders have said to us for decades: be patient, be persistent, stay together, believe in the strengths of how this land holds us together. As Rosalie Cunith Monks used to say to my children, this land holds us all. So commit to do something personally in your mind as you leave this hall today. in that note, in that spirit, to act together, it's my pleasure to introduce Australia's 31st Prime Minister, now in his second term. Please welcome the Honourable Anthony Albanese.
Well, thanks very much, Jeff, and I also begin by thanking Auntie Violet for her welcome to country, and begin by also acknowledging the traditional owners of the land on which we meet and paying my respect to elders past, present and emerging. And I also pay my respect to all Indigenous Australians who are with us this morning. But I also pay my awe in the inspiration that the members of the Stolen Generation who are with us this morning present to all of us with the dignity in which you carry yourselves each and every day. And it was an honour to briefly be with you yesterday morning as well in the Senate courtyard and hear some of those personal stories. I also want to acknowledge Her Excellency the Governor-General of Australia, Sam Mostyn, and pay tribute to the work that Her Excellency is doing in presenting that dignity around Australia, particularly for those people who need lifting up. Sam Mostyn is someone who reaches out in the work that she does. She's visited every corner of this nation, including recently up in the Torres Strait, and that is the role of our head of state. And I thank her for the way in which the Governor-General and Simeon are conducting themselves and bringing honour to our country. I want to acknowledge all of my ministerial colleagues who are here as well, and particularly the Minister for Indigenous Australians, Malindiri McCarthy, but all my ministerial colleagues and members and senators who join us here. To be here every year with you remains one of my greatest honours as Prime Minister, particularly to be able to spend time with the survivors who grace us with your presence. Your strength gave us all the chance of a better Australia. When we look back at that most extraordinary day 18 years ago, we are looking back at the fulfilment of a promise. It was long overdue, held back for too long by those, John Howard to call it out for what it was, so prominent among them, who feared that saying sorry would be calamitous for our country, that it would be an act of division. It was anything but. It was an act which was a necessary component of unity, just as at some stage actually recognising that this country didn't begin in 1788 or 1901 will be a necessary step in changing our constitution at some stage in the future as well. Our nation came together on that morning, united in the fundamental decency that I believe remains our truest guiding light. The apology was a moment of catharsis, and it was a moment of healing. It remains, and I suspect will always remain, my proudest day as a parliamentarian. Prime Minister Kevin Rudd spoke the words that were heard right across the nation. And as he spoke, I looked to the faces in the gallery above. I saw tears, I saw relief, and I saw looks of quiet pride from those who had fought for so long to bring about the act of justice and healing. Survivors with the grace and the bigness of spirit to accept our apology. As I said in the chamber yesterday, the apology was an honest reckoning with our history. It was a recognition that children were torn from their families and from their culture, and that what was broken could not be easily put together. I think of when the great Louisa O'Donoghue finally saw her mother Lily for the first time in 33 years, having been taken from her at the age of just 2. Neither could speak the other's language. As her biographer Stuart Rintoul wrote, "The reunion was not easy. They did not embrace. They did not know how to be with one another. The wounds carried by the stolen generations are so profoundly deep." But the apology didn't just look to the past, it was a call to action for the future. A call that was, at its heart, deeply patriotic, true to our abiding instincts for better, fairer, stronger Australia. An Australia in which we have closed the gap, an Australia in which all Australians get the same chance in life, in which all Australians have power over their destiny. When we look back to that day in February 2008, we rightly reflect on the courage of those who made it possible, and the courage of those who came here to this very building, the pinnacle of a system that had let them down. So many of the finest moments in our history have been defined by resilience, by perseverance, and above all, by courage. And we saw it exemplified that day and every day leading up to it by every member of the stolen generation who had spoken up, for themselves and for those who could not speak, for those who were no longer with us. What that courage held within it was not just a chance for healing, it held the opportunity for a better future, of a nation brought closer together. And once again, I would like to acknowledge the then opposition leader, Brendan Nelson, who recognised that bipartisanship was essential and also showed courage to stand up to those within his own party who objected to his bipartisanship. I particularly want to express my gratitude for the ongoing work of Stolen Generations organisations, driven by survivors, which provide the services and support their communities need. Next year, it will be 30 years since the release of the Bringing Them Home report, the report of the inquiry. I always find it worth returning to the words of Mick Dodson, who said, "I know of no Indigenous person who told their story to the inquiry who wanted non-Indigenous Australians to feel guilty. They just wanted people to know the truth." I'm pleased that Mick's daughter, Shannon, is with us here today, and I want to acknowledge her great contribution through the Healing Foundation. Truth is essential because we can only truly know where we're going if we know where we've been. That is the great journey we can be on together. Last October, I attended the 40th anniversary of the Hawke government handing back Uluru to its traditional owners with Her Excellency the Governor-General. And I turned to the words that Auntie Pamela Taylor, who had shared this memory a decade earlier. We were so happy that after all that struggle, all the talking, the fight to get it back, that it was finally going to be given back. Everybody drew together to celebrate. It was a really happy time. And that is a microcosm of the even greater Australia that we can be. Saying sorry was never intended as the final word, but as the beginning of a bigger, brighter story. A story in which we keep working to close the gap between Indigenous and non-Indigenous Australians until that gap belongs to history. And I acknowledge that we have not done well enough. Governments of all persuasions, including today, we must do better. Closing the gap is a national mission and a moral imperative, and it is the work of generations. We measure tangible outcomes that change people's lives for the better, achieving better outcomes in health and education, planning the economic empowerment that nourishes aspiration and invests in hard work, laying the ground for the success that Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people can build for themselves. As we see results, we draw encouragement from every single reminder that difficult does not mean impossible. However, we cannot close our eyes to the reality that there are areas where progress is stalled. It is starkly clear that we have no room for complacency. And as the recent terrorist attack in Perth reminded us, the forces of racism remain a real and present danger. I repeat to everyone in this room and to all Indigenous Australians the message I've been delivering in Parliament. We see you, we stand with you. This was an attack driven by white supremacist ideology. A lone wolf, as they're called, but one which could have had catastrophic impact, and one which has caused trauma for the Noongar people, but for all Indigenous Australians when they reflect on that. As we gather today to remember, we continue our efforts. We continue what's working, and we work out solutions for what doesn't. And our government knows that there is no better path forward than listening to communities and partnering with locals. The story of the apology began when we as a nation decided to listen, to open our ears, and importantly, open our hearts. We thank you for what you made possible. And we vow that the next chapter we begin to write together that day is one that we continue to write with determination, with optimism, and above all, with each other. Thank you.
Thank you, Prime Minister. The shattering of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander families creates a cross-generational loss of identity for so many children of the First Peoples. Helping others search for connection and discovery of where they belong has been the life work of Pat Thompson AM, a proud Kuku Yalanji Waka Waka woman and the CEO of Queensland's Link Up Aboriginal Corporation. As a baby, Pat was removed from her mother at the Cherbourg Aboriginal Settlement in Queensland. I urge any of you here this morning who have not visited the old Cherbourg ration shed to go and sit with people there and listen, as the Prime Minister urged us to do, to listen to the truth and see how it is connected to how we are together today. At Cherbourg, the lived experience of Pat's life is what has shaped and driven her to keep working for so much that she is contributing to help others find their real belonging and those that still hope for a measure of full justice. Please welcome Auntie Pat Thompson.
Thank you very much. Good morning, and thank you, Prime Minister. Thank you for taking time yesterday out of your very busy sitting day to meet with our Stolen Generation survivors and elders in the outside courtyard. It was really appreciated. Thank you to Aunty Violet for your welcome to country here on Ngunnawal land where we are gathered today, and I pay my respects to elders past and present. I want to particularly acknowledge our Stolen Generation survivors who are in the room today and descendants from all around the country, and to remember those who are no longer with us. I acknowledge and extend our respect to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people here today. I acknowledge Your Excellency, the Honourable Sam Mostyn and husband Simeon. Thank you for sharing today with us and for caring. Minister Mullandiri McCarthy, the many parliamentarians, community leaders, advocates and allies who have chosen to be here today, thank you. This gathering reflects a shared recognition that healing remains a matter of national responsibility, and today's anniversary is not just a reflection on the past. I stand here as a proud Aboriginal woman and the Chief Executive Officer of Link Up Queensland, a small but powerful Aboriginal-led organisation that walks alongside stolen generation survivors and descendants on their healing journeys. I'm a descendant of the Kuku-Yalanji people from far north Queensland and Waka Waka people from Cherbourg. We have had removals, most of us, through our generations. The photograph, there's a photograph up there, is of my grandparents, and that was taken in Cherbourg. My grandparents Roy and Princey Jacobs. My birth mother Pamela is on my nan's lap. Her sister Eileen and brother Roy on either side. I was born in November of 1958 and removed from my birth mother Pamela and placed in the baby quarters at the Cherbourg Hospital. I was removed and placed there to be adopted out to non-Indigenous people. Such were the policies of the day, to remove children from their mothers and to adopt them out to non-Indigenous people in an attempt to assimilate us, to educate us, give us a better life, they said. 2 weeks later, I was given or placed with Mick and Eileen Conlon, Eileen being my birth mother's sister. They stood up to the protector on the mission, demanding that I remain with my family. And 2 years later, in November 1960, I was adopted by Mick and Eileen Conlon, my parents. I grew up calling my birth mother Auntie, but always knew that she was my mother. It was no secret. I often reflect on the courage and the resilience of my parents to stand up to the authorities in those times when the government, through the Protector on Aboriginal missions, ruled every aspect of our lives. My mother was a small but gentle woman. Her courage and determination, though, changed the course of my life, allowing me to be adopted by her and to grow up as a proud Aboriginal woman. Forever grateful to have maintained my family and cultural connections because of her strength and love. She was truly an incredible woman. Not only did she adopt me, but she also raised many of her grandchildren and provided care and stability to countless others who needed it. She never sought any recognition, but her kindness and lasting impact on the lives of those around her. She taught me respect, responsibility, and the importance of standing up for what is right. I'm deeply aware that who I am today is a direct result of her care and determination. My story is not unique. It reflects the experiences of many Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander families who sought to protect their children and maintain family connection in the face of government systems designed to undermine both. We're incredibly strong people. No matter how many times we're knocked down, we continue to get back up day after day. We are survivors, but we are far from healed. Over the past 50 years, my working life, I've held various roles within the public service at local, state and federal levels and in community-led organisations, including my time as an ATSIC elected Commissioner and Regional Council Chair during the 90s and the early 2000s. Each role I saw examples of genuine commitment to change. Unfortunately, I've also seen far too many policies that speak to stolen generation survivors rather than to listen to them. And sadly, I've seen great opportunities for progress and healing scrapped or delayed under political and administrative pressure. Of all the opportunities for hope and healing, for me, one of the brightest was in 1997 with the tabling of the Bringing Them Home report. following the national inquiry into the separation of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander children from their families. The inquiry set the bar for community consultation and genuinely listening to survivors' needs. Its subsequent report provided a clear roadmap for healing, including reparations, support services, truth-telling and accountability. It was this report in 1997 that recommended Australian Parliaments offer official apologies and acknowledge the responsibilities of their predecessors, which led the former Prime Minister Kevin Rudd's famous words some 11 years later. It was one of the 83 recommendations. Next year will be 30 years since the Bringing Them Home report was tabled, and currently only 5 of its 83 recommendations have been fully implemented. It makes me wonder what happened. We're 30 years on. It has now been 18 years since the Prime Minister Rudd committed to turning a new page, and we're still here, fighting for genuine change. I acknowledge that the report's recommendations did not only target the federal government. It pains me to acknowledge that Queensland remains the only jurisdiction yet to establish a redress scheme for stolen generation survivors, despite this being a key recommendation of the 1997 report. This is particularly troubling given Queensland's distinct responsibility in this history. Around 20% of all stolen generation survivors were removed in Queensland. This is not a marginal issue. More than 6,000 survivors are still living in Queensland, and the impacts of their removal continue to affect tens of thousands of individuals, families and communities. The consequences are well documented. Data from the Australian Institute of Health and Welfare shows stolen generation survivors experience significantly higher rates of chronic illness, mental health conditions, housing insecurity and reliance on income support. These harms do not stop with survivors, but ripple across generations through intergenerational trauma, shaping the lives of their descendants and well-being of families and communities across Queensland. Every jurisdiction in Australia has acknowledged this reality through the establishment of redress schemes, except for Queensland. How many stolen generation survivors have died without ever seeing justice, and how many more will pass away before action is finally taken? Survivors in Queensland, many of whom are elderly, have been forced to watch as their peers in other states and territories receive a long overdue step towards genuine healing. We're not asking for charity or for pity. We're seeking recognition, fairness and dignity. Ageing survivors deserve to spend their remaining years knowing that their experiences have been acknowledged, not only in words but through tangible and practical support. Thank you. And at Link Up, we have provided a comprehensive submission to the Queensland Government recognising the urgent establishment of a Queensland Stolen Generations redress scheme. The submission is survivor-informed, evidence-based and grounded in decades of service, delivery and lived experience. We believe the strength of the case warrants serious consideration, and we remain committed to respectful and constructive engagement. We welcome the opportunity for ongoing dialogue with the Queensland Government and will formally present the submission to the Attorney-General, Deb Frecklington, and the Minister for Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander Partnerships, Fiona Simpson, who have agreed to meet with us next month. For many survivors, the 2008 National Apology was a deeply meaningful moment and an important step forward towards truth and justice. Many of us remember it well. I recall an overwhelming feeling of hope as then Prime Minister Kevin Rudd announced what he described as turning a new page in our nation's history. It was an uplifting moment, though it is mixed with emotions that I now look back on that day 18 years ago and reflect on what genuine change has occurred since. We remain hopeful that the establishment of a Queensland Stolen Generations redress scheme can be Queensland's turning of the page moment. I also wish to acknowledge that although other jurisdictions around the country have established redress schemes, many were delivered inadequately. In addition to reparations, all state and territories have much work to do if they genuinely seek to improve survivor wellbeing and address intergenerational impacts. As outlined by the Healing Foundation in its recent report titled "Are You Waiting for Us to Die? The Unfinished Business of Bringing Them Home," all governments must commit to a coordinated, long-term national healing package that strengthens survivor-led services, support family tracing and reunions, invests in culturally safe healing and aged care, and ensures accountability for addressing intergenerational harm. From what we see at Link Up and here on the ground, working with survivors and their families every day, these recommendations must not be ignored. We do not need new inquiries that cost millions of dollars to investigate and re-traumatise our people. We need the remaining 94% of the Bringing Them Home report's recommendations to be implemented. I want to be clear that in calling for stronger government action, I am not suggesting that stolen generation survivors and families are dependent on government support. Survivors have always shown the capacity to initiate and lead their own healing, and much of the healing that has occurred over the past decades have been survivor-driven. However, survivors have too often been forced to carry out this work largely on their own, seeking truth, reclaiming identity, reconnecting with family and culture, and fighting for justice in the absence of the government support that should have been there from the beginning. Survivors are incredibly resilient and deeply determined to heal. Today I'm honoured to be here in Canberra and joined by two stolen generation survivors whose lives and leadership reflect this truth. Paul Sando is the Director of Link Up Queensland and he is with us today. Paul is also featured in one of the light boxes around the room, which I think is a powerful reminder that the histories we speak about are not abstract or distant, but lived and present. Paul is a Darumbal and Waka Waka man who was separated from his family as a child and raised under the Aboriginal Protection Act at Cherbourg. Like so many boys and girls in the dormitory system, he grew up without the security of family life, with cultural connection actively suppressed and identity deliberately withheld. The Domo boys who lived alongside became his brothers, and some of them are here today. Paul's later attempts at reconnection were complex and painful. He experienced not only separation from family, but exclusion from the only place he had ever called home, told at one point by the authorities that he was not welcome back to Cherbourg. Yet despite this, Paul has rebuilt his life, reclaimed his identity, and strengthened his connection to family and community. Today, he is a proud father and grandfather, deeply connected to his sisters and a respected leader. As a board director at Link Up Queensland, Paul brings lived experience into governance and advocacy. His leadership ensures that decisions remain grounded in the realities of survivors' lives and that no one is expected to navigate the long journey to healing alone. Also here today is Paul Robinson. Paul's experience speaks powerfully to the importance of identity, truth and self-determination. For much of his life, Paul was denied access to his full identity, yet through persistence and determination, and with the support of our incredible research team, Paul has reclaimed much of that knowledge. He now proudly identifies as a man of two nations, Tibera and Bundjalung, and speaks of the profound impact that knowing his heritage has had on his sense of self. Paul's journey was not quick or easy. It required patience, resilience, and a willingness to engage with systems not designed for healing. But his story is not one of defeat. It's a remarkable story of persistence and a reminder that healing is not only about dressing past harm, but about enabling people to rebuild their own sense of peace and belonging. I know there are many survivors present here today who could share their own stories of healing through self-determination. Each has found ways to keep going, to heal and to advocate, often quietly, often without recognition, and too often without adequate support. I acknowledge you all, and I thank you for your strength and continued determination to seek justice. Your persistence and leadership remind us that survivors are not defined by what was taken from them, but by the dignity, resilience, and leadership you demonstrate in the face of adversity. For more than 40 years, Link Up Queensland has walked along survivors and their families through such healing journeys. Established in 1984, Link Up was created in response to the growing calls from Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people affected by forced removal to support and reconnect with family, culture and identity, long before national apologies, inquiries or policy frameworks existed. From the beginning, our work has been grounded in the simple but profound understanding that healing begins with truth and connection. Every day, our organisation supports survivors and descendants to access records, trace family histories, reunite with family, return to country, and navigate the complex emotional terrain that accompanies reconnection. This includes counselling support, reunion facilitation, research, advocacy, and practical assistance, all delivered in ways that are all culturally safe, survivor-led and trauma-informed. This important work is carried out by an extraordinary team of our people, our researchers, caseworkers, counsellors and administrative staff bring skill, compassion and deep commitment to their roles. What unites us is a shared belief in the dignity of survivors and a determination to support healing in ways that respect lived experience. Much of this work is unseen. It happens in long phone calls, quiet conversations, careful and thorough research, and moments of trust built up over months or years. It requires patience, cultural knowledge, and emotional strength, particularly given the weight of vicarious trauma carried by those working so closely with survivors' stories. Yet our team continues this work with integrity, care and resilience because they understand what is at stake. Link Up organisations across the country, and some of them are here today, have carried this responsibility for decades. We have done so despite inconsistent funding, shifting policy priorities and long delays in government action, and we will continue to do so because survivors and their families cannot wait. We will remain alongside survivors, families and communities for as long as that support is needed, before, during and beyond the time when governments are genuinely committed to turning a new page in our nation's history. Whilst today is a special day, healing is not a moment. It is not a speech, a report or an anniversary. It is a responsibility. If governments are serious about turning a new page, then that page must be written through action. The roadmap has already been written for you. Survivors outlined their needs almost 30 years ago. The question before governments now is not what to do, but whether they have the courage to act. Time is not on the side of survivors, and justice delayed is justice denied. Thank you.
We hear you, Auntie Pat, and there's healing in your words, Pat. I trust there will also be healing in the power of music and song. We're honoured this morning to be graced with a very special performance of Bungaree Movement 2 by Deborah Cheetham Freyon and the Canberra Symphony Orchestra String Quartet. Most of you know that Professor Cheetham Freyon has so many extraordinary accomplishments. She's held her head high for this country and especially her people around the world, using stunning artistic talents, the power of voice and music, to bring knowledge and respect for both Australia as a country and especially her people. Please give a very warm welcome back to Deborah Cheetham Freyon and the Canberra Symphony Orchestra String Quartet for their performance. Good.
Thank you, everyone. Auntie Violet, Auntie Pat, Your Excellency, Prime Minister, and honoured guests, I want to begin by acknowledging my mother, Monica Little, the youngest of 7 children. Her eldest brother, Jimmy Little, would be known to many of you. He often said that Monica was really the singer of that family. I pay respect to my mother, Monica, who had to bear the trauma of having me removed from her, taken from her, stolen from her at 3 weeks of age. I'm one of 9 children. Monica suffered 6 of her children to be taken from her. We were reunited in later years. I honour her today, and my performances are for everyone in this room who is affected. And by that I say everyone in this room, because what diminishes us as First Nations people diminishes all Australians. By the same token, what strengthens First Nations people strengthens all Australians. I have a short time to introduce this work. It was a commission which I composed for the Flinders Quartet in 2019. I want to thank my colleagues John, Bianca, Lucy and Sam for their fine playing already this morning and for their interpretation of this second movement, which is simply stunning. Dates matter. And I want to transport you now to November the 24th, 1830. The newly colonised lands of the Gadigal people, already known as Sydney, can hear the sobbing and wailing of a widow. Her name is Karu. She is the daughter of Muruburu, after which the suburb of Maroubra is named. Karu is mourning the loss of her husband, Bungaree. Bungaree is a name that I want to ensure you know. He lived out the last 2 years of his life with Karu on the King's Domain, surviving off scant rations. This was after a life of service on HMS Reliance, HMS Investigator, and HMS Mermaid. I wrote this piece in 2019. I'd had the commission for some time, but I decided on Bungaree in response to the then Prime Minister's mistaken attribution of the circumnavigation of Australia to James Cook. Of course, we in this room know that that must be attributed to Bungari. Or so said Matthew Flinders in his diaries, noting that it would have been virtually impossible to circumnavigate and map this great continent without Bungari's knowledge as an initiated First Nations man. In this country, there are a number of statues that commemorate Matthew Flinders. I think there are 9. I know there are 3 that commemorate his cat, Trim. There's not one yet to Bungari, but we could do something about that, couldn't we? So this second movement of the string quartet, we hear Karu's mourning, but we hear her love. Love, grief is the price we pay for love. We hear the tenderness of their connection. And we know that this was a man who deserves to be known throughout our nation as someone who made an incredible contribution. But it's also worth remembering that in spite of all of that contribution, the last 2 years of his life were spent in captivity. We cannot allow that to be perpetrated through the rest of our lives. We celebrate today those who have survived and thrived. And we hold those who are still dislocated from their families in our hearts on this day. And I dedicate the performance of the second movement of Bungari, the movement Karu, to all the mothers, the children. Thank you.
Our thanks to the Canberra Symphony Orchestra String Quartet, and Deborah, your story was perfect. On this day, if we listen, like Matthew Flinders did, to Bulgari, we surely would find that way ahead. We surely would listen to those voices today telling us that the plan has been written. The steps forward are very clear. We simply have to take action. And then, like Matthew Flinders and Bulgari, we might see very clearly where to go from here to brighter days. We have more of this program coming, but please enjoy your breakfast, and I'll be calling you for a little attention sooner than you think. Thank you. As we've been hearing this morning from every speaker, and as many of you have discussed at your tables, the impact of the removal of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander children from their families not only had impact in that time, but it continues to impact poverty, homelessness, crime, the overrepresentation of the First Peoples in our nation's prisons. That is part of the legacy of shattering families and communities. The law itself in some parts of Australia still sees Aboriginal children as young as 10 locked up. The disproportionate incarceration and the pattern ongoing of black deaths in custody is an enduring national shame. One of Australia's passionate advocates for justice on many fronts and putting her life into action for justice is the first Aboriginal woman elected to an Australian Superior Court. Please welcome a proud Kamilaroi woman, Justice Louise Taylor of the ACT Supreme Court.
Thank you, Jeff. And thank you to one of my favourite people in the world, Auntie Violet, for your, as always, warm welcome to country. Like so many of our people around this country, you generously share our culture with pride and sincerity. I pay deep respect to you, Auntie, to other Ngunnawal elders, and to all those wise old people, knowledge holders who came before you. I also pay my deep respects to Auntie Pat and all of the survivors and their families in the room with us today. I am honoured, deeply honoured, to be in your presence and to be able to speak with you today. In 1997, the Bringing Them Home report laid bare a shameful chapter in this nation's history. It did so in part through the voices of little people who grew into adults who had suffered through being forcibly removed from their families because of government policy. In preparation for what I might say today, I went back to that report. The first-person narratives included in the report read like a punch to the heart. I was at the post office with my mum and auntie. They put us in the police ute and said they were taking us to Broome. They put the mums in there as well, but when we'd gone about 10 miles, they stopped and threw the mothers out of the car. We jumped on our mothers' backs, crying, trying not to be left behind, but the policemen pulled us off while our mothers were chasing the car, running and crying after us. We were screaming in the back of that car. When we got to Broome, they put me and my cousin in the Broome lockup. We were only 10 years old. We were in the lockup for 2 days, waiting for the boat to Perth. The 1997 report exposed the horror of forced removals, a practice which casts a long shadow over those who conceived and implemented the policy. It demonstrates the smug superiority which underpinned the certainty that our extinction as a people was likely, and that those not made extinct could be absorbed by stripping away family, language, and culture, not to mention dignity. Reading the report, I was struck by the extent to which our strength and our tenacity as cultural peoples was entirely underestimated by those who anticipated our extinction. And I was reminded that, remarkably, we are a patient people, well versed in the need to play a long game. Perhaps it stems from our certainty that we are of this land and the strength we take from our connection to each other. We know that we uniquely belong here, the prospect of our extinction destroyed long ago. That tenacity, that patience is surely in the room here this morning, and I pay tribute to it. I am inspired by it. On this day in 2008, I was in the foyer of a building in Melbourne which was broadcasting the apology. I confess to you that I was sceptical about the apology, but I found myself frozen still in that foyer as the bustling city moved around me. I was mesmerised by the moment as the imagery of the apology beamed into that foyer. I found myself overcome by emotion, moved by the emotion that I could see in my people, as finally this country in this place acknowledged the truth of the deliberate and systematic taking of our children, a truth we have always known. Of course, the consequences of that policy, intended to rip apart Black families, extended far beyond those who were directly affected. As I watched the apology, I was struck by the role of luck in my own Kamilaroi grandmother's life. Mary Ann O'Leary, an Aboriginal girl from Barrabar and Corindai, the daughter of Blanche Natty and Charles O'Leary, in case I have any relations in the room. She was a single mother to a blue-eyed Aboriginal baby boy at just 15. Such was the fear that forced removals generated in our people that pregnant, unmarried and Black, a child herself, she hightailed it to Sydney and spent many years on the move there to avoid the welfare man. She succeeded, but of course we know that many did not. In my mind's eye, I also pictured my husband's grandmother, Patricia Patton, taken at age 10 from Bayugal, standing in a photo with her 3 sisters in matching starched dresses outside of Cootamundra Girls' Home. Downcast, serious-looking little girls with sadness in their eyes. The terrible effect of their absence has rippled through the generations of their family. No doubt many of you in this room have your own memories of your experience of that day in 2008. I was sceptical about the apology, not because of its significance to those to whom it meant so much, but because it seemed to me that the failure to deliver it alongside a complete package of reparations to those who had been so severely wronged undermined its power. As a fairly green lawyer back then, I knew that one of the tasks of the justice system foisted upon us was to deal with claims made by people who say they have been wronged, by other people, by corporations, and by government. As an operator in the thick of that system now, I know that if a person is successful in establishing a wrong that has harmed them, the justice system commonly recognises that harm with damages and other remedies. An entirely uncontroversial function of the justice system, which is tied, I think, to basic human decency. Of course, you don't need a judgment from a court to do that which decency alone demands. In my practice of law for many years, and now in my courtroom as a judge, I witness the modern day effect of the removal of our children from their families at what are scandalous rates. As it did in the past, removal leaves children longing for the sense of belonging that thrives when you are surrounded by family, by culture and community. That certain feeling of belonging is a powerful anchor when children go out into the world. It makes them confident that no matter what the world throws at them, they will always be firmly tethered to what makes them who they are. Depriving children of that anchor, I promise you, is paving the way for them from the child protection system to the youth justice system and on to the adult criminal justice system. In recognising that fact, I think we should be careful not to conflate the experience of survivors of the stolen generations with the challenge of the modern day child protection system. That is not to say that one is or was worse than the other, but nor are they the same. Though they each reveal the danger of demonising our people and the life-altering consequences of removing children from their families, the particular lesson that the horror of the stolen generations teaches and the story it tells about the endurance embodied by survivors must never lose its force. The devastating harm brought about by the racist conclusion that our children, our babies, were better off without their family, their language, their culture, their anchor, is beyond doubt. Survivors of the stolen generations deserve a special place of reverence in our, at times, painful national story. Their survival in the face of a brutal practice is a testament to their courage, and their presence here today a living, breathing monument to all they have overcome. For the apology to have ongoing meaning, as it should, as it must, our reverence for survivors must be reflected in modern day government policy and community action which properly takes up the challenge of the many recommendations made in 1997 yet to be fulfilled. Survivors should see that their participation in the 1997 report meant something then and means something now. Decency dictates that. If the injustice inflicted upon our people in the past is a great stain on our nation's soul, as the apology suggested, then the response to that injustice must offer us as a nation redemption. When he offered the apology without qualification in 2008, then Prime Minister Rudd said that there comes a time in the history of nations when their people must become fully reconciled to their past if they are to go forward with confidence to embrace their future. Whether the promise of full reconciliation for our nation has been realised is perhaps a question for another occasion. But the promise which was at the heart of the apology, to right a great wrong, was not entirely fulfilled in 2008. The work to realise that promise, to chase redemption and demonstrate to survivors in particular and to our people that the apology was more than just words, must continue. Thank you for your attention this morning.
Thank you, Justice Taylor. You're an inspiration. It's because of the patience, persistence, the resilience that Justice Taylor spoke of one particular man here this morning, Michael McLeod, and his message stick team, that we are gathered, that we've been here year after year for 18 years to renew a commitment to fulfill that promise in the original national apology. A Ngarrindjeri Monaro man, a member himself of the Stolen Generations, Michael was once broken and living on the street. And it was soon after that that I met him. And I know he had a long, hard climb, but he did recover. He went on to great success, but he always saw that as about what he could do, how he could use his networking. It's more than that, his open heart in the way that he is with everyone in this country. And he brought so many of us here together. I'm proud that we are friends, but I'm prouder that you've invested everything of your life in working for others and trying to see this healing carried on around the entire country. Would you please welcome a great friend of us all, Michael McLeod.
I just want to say thank you, Auntie Violet. You are amazing, bringing up issues that we need to discuss, and I think we cannot neglect that have impacted so my generation of survivors and those even older than me, and it hasn't changed with our youth now. So it's a fundamental thing that we look at. I want to just say I thank you for acknowledging that we're on Ngunnawal country and that we've got this opportunity to share. Now, I rarely do this, I've got to say. I don't think I've ever got up here and spoken. I've only ever given the vote of thanks at the end, which is a few minutes, and it's like, but this year, it's the 18th year anniversary, and I've asked myself, where are we at? Where are we truly at? And do we understand the significance of what we are confronted with? Still 18 years down the track, it's like, well, I've got a view on it, and I think it's been shared up here as well. And I probably am more jaded because I've invested as much as I can into seeing change, fundamental change, that our political elite, that our corporates who attend this function do what they're very much aware of. And we're not even scratching the surface of the issues that we're confronted with, and that's intolerable. I just heard, Just Taylor, you're just amazing. I will say the fact that we're here talking about our youth who are at the age of 10 imprisoned. What kind of a society are we? How do we justify that? We can't. That's the whole thing. Yet we have governments there, state, federal, territorial, whichever, and it's like, where has it broken down that we cannot address the systemic issues that we're confronted with? I'm at a loss as a society that we allow that to happen, because we shouldn't. Now, the one thing is, I can join a lot of people who are outraged by it up here and whatever, and it's like, and the one thing you will probably do know about me, I don't write speeches or anything, so I actually got someone else to do it for me, write point forms so I wouldn't forget, because I get forgetful as I'm getting older. And but more importantly, I've got to say, being a survivor doesn't mean that life, and you come through it, doesn't mean life changes. It doesn't. For myself, I live with the past. I can't let that go. It's why I do what I do. My investment into our young people. And I've done that for a while now. And I'm really proud of that. But I will say, one of the things here, in this room right now, with our survivors at your tables are a gathering of very powerful decision makers. And I think that's the issue here. It's how do we work with you to ensure that we're able to do something that changes, how we look at the future. How do we change things? And it's like, I will say, at the end, all I can say is that what's happening now is just not okay. It's just not okay. I don't understand it to a certain degree. So I've made a decision that, you'll probably see this little blue one on your table there. And what I'm going to do is proactively, for as long as I can, try and address the issues with like-minded people through the Pauline E. McLeod Foundation, my late sister's foundation that was set up by Scott Allen, and he's an amazing board. And then they've just recently made me the chair of, which I'm really humbled by, and I think will provide a lot of opportunities for others. And I will say that it's a strange thing when I look what my sister went through. That was horrific in itself, the trauma that she suffered. I mean, you probably all know her from play school, first Aboriginal person on play school. And it was like extraordinary that she made it there, but the story behind it was like really, really, really sad. And I think you all know my story is like I'm the youngest of 6 siblings. At the end of the day, it's like we all got taken when I was 12 months of age, made wards of the state throughout New South Wales. I never got to meet them until my mid-20s again. Met my sister when I was 26, and it was like through Link Up New South Wales, which was an extraordinary thing. I'm really proud of them. There's only 2 of us left, my second eldest brother and myself. The rest are like other survivors here. The others have moved on, and it's really sad. I never got to really get to know them. But I will say, when I think about it, and I did introduce this to you, because I'm going to do something, go a bit out. Yeah. Can I ask Kate, I'm so sorry, Kate and Adam and Scott, yourself as well, and George Brown, you're there. Can you stand up as well? Because I want to show you what the future looks like. I want you to see them. If you are a corporate senior executive or whatever, these are the decision makers of where our youth are going. So Adam here, Adam Davids, he is the CEO of Career Trackers. And if you know Career Trackers, we're churning out, I hate to say that term, interns and alumni, Indigenous, who are going through and are becoming the future leaders. So he's keeping an eye on that. That's a really important thing. And George up there, George Brown, my cousin up there, he's one of them. He's gone through university. He's been an intern and, an alumni. He took all his knowledge back to Wreck Bay, his community, and he's applied it there. And I think that is just an amazing thing. And he hasn't asked government for a handout whatsoever. He's not done that. He's applied his knowledge, and he's supported by Career Trackers. And from my point of view, I look at what he does, and then of course the Supply Nation. I'm really proud of that as the co-founder of that. Kate's here, and I will say she's the CEO. And when we look at it, $20 billion procurement dollars last year or something phenomenal. It's like. Yeah, but more importantly, so social value of that alone is like 42.6 billion annually. So you got to understand, she's in charge of something that's extraordinary. And let me just lead with something else here. And I'm doing this on purpose. There's Scott Wharton here, amazing guy. He's on the board. He's a long-term board member of Supply Nation. And we've got Penny Bingham, a co-chair. And I'm quite sure, there you are, Damien, a co-chair. They're striving to ensure that we have financial independence from government, this is it. This is how we do it. And I want you to look at them and go, right, you've got a place to go here. And it is a fundamental thing that we should be driving our independence, the decision making is ours. I'm sick of it. I've gone to government and said, I need help for our youth. And unfortunately, I've not even got a hearing. So it didn't really matter what my name is or the network I have. And I just think, doesn't government care? And I've come to the decision it's too hard for them. They don't get it. So I'm going to commit what I have, my resources, my network, to ensuring that the survivors who are at this table don't feel that we're neglected, that we can support the next generation, the future leaders who are our youth. We cannot allow them to, be left behind. We can't have another intergenerational. What I'll do is, I think we're coming close to the end, so I just want to thank you so much. You've come back over the years. It's 18 years. And I will say the National Apology Breakfast is like, it was never meant to be about me. It was meant to be about the survivors. So it's the 18th year, 2 more years. It's going to be the 20th year. And from my point of view, we've got to do something different here, even with the National Apology Breakfast. It should go national. So within the Pauline E. McLeod Foundation, we're going to wrap the National Apology Breakfast. We'll have it here, but we'll have it in every state and territory across Australia, because every Australian should be able to do this. And the only thing I would say, just to add to this, is I'm really sorry it's taken so long for me to even open my eyes. I just was hoping, a glimmer of hope, that decision makers, be they in our states or federal government, whatever, I just thought they would be more sensitive to the issues that we're confronted with, and these amazing people who stood here, and support them in a far greater, because they deliver on a scale. So me, all the Aboriginal, people here, the survivors, you know who they are. They're open to the discussions. To the corporates here, they're open to the discussion about the future. And to one person who gave me some amazing support yesterday is the Governor General. We took some of the survivors here to her house, Government House, and they got to share their stories like I haven't heard in a long time. And they each got up and they were able to share. And because of the compassion and the generosity of the Governor General, I will say, we're coming back. Yeah. With a bigger crowd, so thank you, everybody. Thank you for being here, and I do look forward to the future for what we take control of, and that's the most important thing from my point. So.
Thank you, Michael. On this day, February the 13th, back in 2008, then Prime Minister Kevin Rudd delivered the promise that had been overdue for more than 2 centuries. With the recognition implicit in the national apology to Australia's First Peoples, with particularly to the hurt done to the stolen generations, we do need today to reprise those words of truth. They were imbued then with a commitment to justice and a solemn promise not to repeat those mistakes of the past. After that reprise, we'll have a video message from Dr. Rudd in Washington, and he will take up Michael's invitation to look at where we stand 18 years on from this historic national apology.
Today we honour the Indigenous peoples of this land, the oldest continuing cultures in human history. We reflect on their past mistreatment. We reflect in particular on the mistreatment of those who were stolen generations, this blemished chapter in our national history. The time has now come for the nation to turn a new page in Australia's history by righting the wrongs of the past and so moving forward with confidence to the future. We apologise for the laws and policies of successive parliaments and governments that have inflicted profound grief, suffering and loss on these our fellow Australians. We apologise especially for the removal of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander children from their families, their communities and their country, for the pain, suffering and hurt of these stolen generations, their descendants and for their families left behind, we say sorry. To the mothers and the fathers, the brothers and the sisters, for the breaking up of families and communities, we say sorry. And for the indignity and degradation thus inflicted on a proud people and a proud culture, we say sorry. We, the Parliament of Australia, respectfully request that this apology be received in the spirit in which it is offered, as part of the healing of the nation. For the future, we take heart, resolving that this new page in the history of our great continent can now be written. We today take this first step by acknowledging the past and laying claim to a future that embraces all Australians. To the stolen generations, I say the following. As Prime Minister of Australia, I am sorry. On behalf of the Government of Australia, I am sorry. On behalf of the Parliament of Australia, I am sorry. And I offer you this apology without qualification. We apologise for the hurt, the pain and suffering we, the Parliament, have caused you by the laws that previous Parliaments have enacted. We apologise for the indignity, the degradation and the humiliation these laws embody. We offer this apology to the mothers, the fathers, the brothers, the sisters, the families and the communities whose lives were ripped apart by the actions of successive governments under successive parliaments. So let us turn this page together, Indigenous and non-Indigenous Australians, government and opposition, Commonwealth and state, and write this new chapter in our nation's story together.
I honour the first Australians on whose lands we meet and whose cultures we celebrate as the oldest continuing cultures in human history. I acknowledge the Prime Minister, ministers and members of the Parliament, past and present, gathered in the Great Hall today. And I pay tribute to the venerable and irrepressible Michael McLeod from Message Stick and all the staff who support this gathering here, commemorating the 18th anniversary of the National Apology. I'm sorry I can't be with you today. There are still a few things going on here in Washington these days, and I don't resume my life as a free-range chicken for another month or so. One of the great wisdoms of our Aboriginal brothers and sisters is to teach us that according to the Dreamtime, time itself is of little linear consequence. Because according to the Dreamtime, we live in an eternity of time and space. It was we in the Western world and through Western modernity that decided instead to draw lines and squares around these eternal things, as well as carving out chasms between human beings and the rest of the created order, including animals, plants, and indeed the earth itself. Aboriginal deep history, by contrast, and the great mysteries it embraces, bears many resemblances to ancient Abrahamic traditions on the origins of our universe and of all things. Indeed, we all have much more in common than we think. Despite all of this, I still find myself to be very much a creature of time and space, where we meticulously count the days, the months, and the decades. And when I think of this day as the 18th anniversary of the delivery of the apology in the House of Representatives, I know that 18 years is a very long time for most of us. Even though in the depths of the Dreamtime, it is nothing but a fragment of collective memory, delivered through songlines going back some 65,000 years. I remember clearly, as if it was only yesterday, that morning of the apology. Torres and I had greeted Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islanders from across the country at the ceremonial entrance outside the Prime Minister's office in the ministerial wing of the building. There were many tears shed that morning. I remember one elderly Aboriginal woman hugging me, heaving tears of relief, still not believing that the apology was actually going to happen. And after I kissed her on the cheek, she said to me that was the first kiss she'd ever received from a white fella. I've never forgotten that, and all the racist brutality that her simple message conveyed. There was a lot of talking that morning, as each person unburdened themselves of the hurts, pains and indignities that this proud people had suffered over the previous 200 years. The problem for me was I hadn't quite finished writing the apology by then. We'd had a few things on that week, including an attempted military coup in East Timor, and I was due to be on my feet delivering this speech, the apology, barely an hour and a half later. I remember clearly Albo, then as Leader of the House, coming into the Prime Minister's office barely 15 minutes before proceedings were to commence, only to find me huddled over a word processor with a staffer at the keyboard as we worked through the last lines of the apology. Albo's response always stays with me in my mind. "Bugger me," he said, "you really cut it close." I said, "It'll be fine, I just needed another 10 minutes. And then, as we walked into the chamber together, myself flipping through the pages of the text to make sure there weren't any blank pages in the middle. While I had spent much of the week working on it and many months thinking about it, the apology, or at least its final formal text, was a bit of a near-run thing that day. I wanted to make sure that every single word of it, as the Prime Minister of the country, representing the people of Australia there assembled, that every one of those words was authentically mine. The thing about the Australian people, Indigenous and non-Indigenous, is that they are very, very good at spotting a fraud at 100 paces. And it's been a very long time since the first beginnings of what became the reconciliation movement, going way back to the 1967 referendum. Aboriginal leaders told me afterwards that they feared being dudded again. And I was determined not to do that. Of course, saying you're sorry is one thing, although, as it turned out, saying sorry was the hardest thing of all for many people to do. But it's something else again to turn the words of the apology into real things that matter in changing people's lives. And this has become the continuing moral test for us all. That's where Closing the Gap comes in, to give us an annual reckoning based on our progress or regress in the hard scrabble of education, health, employment and housing outcomes, and in the rates of incarceration. It's been a long road these last 18 years, and it's true, there have been failures and successes along the way through. We are tempted often just to focus on our failures. In some respects, that's our normal human nature at work. But it's not good for the country, nor for Aboriginal people, just to do that. When I look around the country at what's happened over the period of time, I see, for example, great institutional innovations committed to the practical business of reconciliation. I think, for example, of Jared Neesham and the remarkable work of the Clontarf Foundation, building a bridge between Aboriginal communities, the fun of competitive football, and through that finding apprenticeships and other pathways to real-world job opportunities. And I also think of the work of the Australian Indigenous Education Foundation, led by Andrew Penfold. Andrew would normally be with us today. He's a regular. He's been for the last 18 years because the practical business of reconciliation through educational opportunity has been his core focus. But as many of you know, Andrew suffered a stroke a few weeks ago, and although he's recovering well, he won't be back at work for a little while yet. He's asked me to send all of you his absolute best this morning. Back in 2008, I agreed with Andrew that the government would invest an initial $20 million in AIEF in responding to community demand for Indigenous facilities choosing to enrol their children in the best private boarding schools in the country. I did so on the condition that Andrew go out and find $20 million from the private sector as well. He promptly did that, and a lot more besides. Since then, it has grown vastly in its scope. The AIEF now supports over 1,500 students and alums each year. Its graduates come from over 400 local communities in every state and territory of Australia. Almost half of all AIEF scholarship students come from remote and very remote local communities. Of these, 1 in 3 are now back working or studying in their home communities. And of this 1,500 young Aboriginal leaders, 97% are now employed, studying, or engaged in other community work. They are young people like Leon from Broome in WA, who completed Year 12 at Wesley College in South Perth in 2023. Leon now works at the Broome Regional Aboriginal Medical Service as an Aboriginal health practitioner, delivering frontline care back in the community that raised him. They include Cody from La Perouse in Sydney, who completed Year 12 at St Vincent's College, Potts Point in 2022. Cody is the founder of a social enterprise protecting and promoting Aboriginal culture. She also works as a senior policy officer at the New South Wales Aboriginal Education Consultative Group. They include Wyatt from Gatton in Queensland, go Queensland, who graduated from Ipswich Grammar School in 2015, again on an AIEF scholarship. Today, Wyatt is an associate at the global law firm Jones Day, and he has now joined the AIEF board, bringing serious expertise from the legal community and the business community into the practical work of Indigenous education and opportunity. This was all because of the vision and the activism of Andrew Penfold, the bloke I first met on the day of the apology 18 years ago. From little things, big things grow. I pay tribute to the work of Andrew and the work that continues to this day. I thank the Australian government, the Australian business community, and some of Australia's best private schools for getting behind this vital initiative. Of course, the hard business of reconciliation goes on, and regrettably, not all support it. On the 26th of January, we barely avoided a mass casualty in Perth. That act of white supremacist terrorism was intended to massacre countless Indigenous men, women and children who were out peacefully on the streets of Perth. It was an outrageous assault, not only on them, but their non-Indigenous supporters and the right of all citizens to protest peacefully. And it comes as our nation is still grieving for the victims and reeling from what happened on Bondi Beach in Sydney in December, the most deadly, politically motivated terrorist attack against our Jewish brothers and sisters we have seen. There has long been a bond between Indigenous Australians and Jewish Australians, as both have experienced the indignity of racism on our shores. Many of you would know the story of Australians like Jim Spiegelman, who later became Chief Justice of New South Wales. The son of Holocaust survivors, he put his body on the line to expose racial segregation by organising with Charlie Perkins the Great Freedom Riot of 1965. Then there is a much older story of William Cooper, a proud Aboriginal elder, which has particular resonance at this moment. Some of you will know about the Evian Conference in France in 1938. At that meeting, we, as Australia, joined the other nations of the world in discussing the Jewish problem. We closed our hearts and we turned our backs on Jewish refugees fleeing the murderous white supremacists of Nazi Germany. William Cooper wasn't among our delegates at Evian because he was a man who had no rights to citizenship within his own country. He had been born in 1861, spent his youth in enforced labour, and had barely 7 months of formal education. When the Kristallnacht pogroms erupted across Germany in November of 1938, William Cooper began gathering signatures from fellow Aboriginals around the country for a petition excoriating Germany's persecution of the Jews. I try to imagine in my mind's eye the reactions of the German consulate officials as William Cooper led his protest down Collins Street to their offices to present his petition. I told this story in a speech when I was Australian Foreign Minister at Yad Vashem, the Holocaust Memorial in Jerusalem, back in 2010. We had gathered there with William Cooper's descendants to honour his memory. Cooper's is an important story in our national history, and it is one that bears repeating. We must never heed the call of those who seek to dehumanise and divide. Racism is not simply harmful, it is also unpatriotic. It is not who we are as a people. What happened at Bondi was indescribably evil. What happened on the 26th of January in Perth was also evil, even though the bomb did not go off. Many of our Indigenous sisters and brothers now question whether it is safe to exercise their democratic right to assemble in public, just as Jewish Australians are deeply anxious for their safety. So on this 18th anniversary of the apology, let us all, whatever our political beliefs, whatever our political affiliations might be, commit afresh to our great and continuing mission of reconciliation for all. In things essential, unity. In things non-essential, diversity. And in all things, the deepest respect for one another. And it is in that spirit that together we will indeed advance Australia.
We thank Kevin Rudd. Thank you, Dr. Rudd, for your reflections, but also for ending on a positive note of commitment to take further action, to remind ourselves that we have more in common than the things that could divide us, and to focus still on building a more equitable society. Let me begin a special vote of thanks to the Healing Foundation, Shannon Dodson and others. The Stolen Generation organisations around the country that will be holding smaller events in these hours, but linked to what this 18th year commemoration is all about. The Message Stick team we have acknowledged and their hard work putting this together once more. The indispensable funding partners, and this is important, without you, this couldn't happen. CommBank, National Indigenous Australians Agency, the Nullawilli Group and Supply Nation are supporting this cause and this movement for action and change into the future. This has been, for me, a memorable morning to listen and see others commit to further listening and taking the lessons of these truthful stories to be a personal call to action within our families, our corporations, our neighbourhoods, and to everyone we know, to make this the unfinished business our most important commitment for the rest of our lives in this nation. It is the foundational unity that we still need to work on. Our special thanks to Aunty Violet Sheridan for your opening speech. Your welcome to country is not only heartfelt, you remind us of the deeper story of this land and the voices of those that have gone, of all of those that are our inspiration still today. David Williams, every year your didge goes right through my chest, and I hear the same sound everywhere in this country, connected in these hours that we gather here. And especially this morning with Deborah Cheetham Freyon and the Canberra Symphony Orchestra String Quartet. That was magic. Thank your players for being part of this. It will never be the same. I hope we can do something like this, as Michael said, all over the country on this day. Forget January the 26th. These natural arousals of truth and passion and unity are what we need to focus on, not a page of a calendar to argue over. Focus on what we have in common and listen to that song of the country calling us to do the work of link up that Auntie Pat Thompson spoke to us about. Support the organisations that are still seriously working on the healing, the recompense, the stubborn governments like Queensland, the lethargy of state and territory about the constant ongoing removal of children from their families. We thank the Prime Minister for being here, the Governor-General and your family for being here. And I can only say to those of you of the stolen generation at your tables, Michael wanted you to take with you today some of those Australian wildflowers, a little piece of Ngunnawal country home with you as you go back to different parts of the country. It is the land and all of its peoples through all of time that binds us together. That is our truthful history. Have a very good morning. Carry with you the voices you have heard. Stay in that place of deep listening and join together in the song of this country. Thank you, everyone.